Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network News. As always, I'm your host, The Spicer, and today's special report is brought to you by none other than Side 7 Exports. Side 7 Exports is your one-stop shop for all your PBandai and Gundam base exclusive needs, and when you're placing your order for the item we're talking about today, remember the promo code GUNPLANetwork10 to save you 10% off. Now today's special report is covering the newly announced PBandai high-grade after colony Vayeate and Mercurius, our red and blue Oni from Gundam Wing. Now, I'm particularly excited about these, but looking at the promotional images, I had some speculation and kind of got a little worried about something, so we're going to go over that. And of course, in the comments below, tell me what you think about kind of my speculation and what I'm seeing from these promotional images and what you think is going to happen, and just how excited you are about these two kits because they look so good. Anyway, starting us off in the articulation section, one of the things that has me concerned, it's one of only two, so that's a good sign, is the elbow. The elbow itself looks like it's not going to be very big in terms of its articulation. It's not going to get over 90, and that is marginally concerning. Now, this is partially due to the promotional images we have seen. They all look to kind of be the same. We get a little bit more visual, or a little bit more examples rather, from the Mercurius, as it's going to be in more kind of melee-esque poses than the Vayeate is going to be. However, they both kind of give off the same vibe of the arms aren't really that elaborate and only go up a certain amount. Now, of course, this could be like the high-grade After Colony Leo and just have kind of like a little plate over the top but still have a double joint. But all the promotional images we have seen so far, none of them have the elbow going above 90. If any, maybe just a little bit more that you really can't tell, but no more than 90 really. And I mean, the silver lining is you don't really need extra articulation. I mean, for PBandai and high-grade kits of this era, this day and age, 2020, we should expect better. But the poses you're really going to want to get these in really aren't going to need more than 90. And I think there's something we'll talk about a little later on that might kind of help with that. But generally speaking, 90 degrees is kind of what we're looking at. Now, the knees are kind of the next concern here, and this is a lot more, I wouldn't say confirmed, but a lot easier to see. There's a lot less confusion. It's partially just the knees design. Now, we do see some of this out of the Vayeate and the Mercurius. We had a couple of different angles in the promotional shots and the exhibit in the Gundam base. But the way the side armor on the knee works, it does look like it kind of slides up the thigh, but the way they're attached, it doesn't seem to go more than just a little over 90, so maybe like 100, 110 degrees. Nothing crazy. And once again, these aren't suits known for really dramatic, exaggerated poses, but there's gotta be a way, especially if you're already kind of cutting in that thigh movement, to kind of push that up a little further. Now, it's not a huge deal, it's not a deal breaker. The knees do look a little wonky, but they aren't terrible. And once again, it's kind of that expectation versus reality of, sure, we should expect better from PBandai and high grade at this point, but if you kind of get over that a little bit, it looks okay. Sure, that's kind of a quick dismissal there. And ideally, hopefully I'm wrong, and these will go much further, but if that is the case, at least you know most of the poses you're going to need aren't going to really necessitate it. And once again, I think Bandai is kind of clued into that and provided something else that'll help. Which gets us to the cool, exciting parts of the articulation, and that is going to start us back up to the ab crunch. Now, I went back and forth on this for a while as to whether this was going to actually be a solid piece and we weren't going to get any ab articulation, or it was going to be like the Leo where there's a separate joint in there with just a plastic covering. I initially thought it was a solid piece because the exhibit at the Gundam base, it looked like it was panel lined and just a solid piece because they didn't have any movement side to side, like it was just a straight stick. in terms of how the torso was posed. So I was like, ooh, that's a little concerning. But the more I go back and look at the promotional images, it does look to be a separate piece. I've zoomed in a lot and like scratched my head a ton. It's more likely than not a separate piece. I can't see them not using the Leo torso for that because it's effectively like the same thing. And it would work pretty well. You're not going to get a ton out of it. And with these suits kind of being just like a hair back heavy but not too bad, it should work fine without causing too many problems. But if we do get some ab crunch, the Mercurius is going to get some really nice articulation that is going to kind of help a little bit in that if the elbow's a little jank, it'll kind of help swing that forward a little. And if the knees are there, it kind of helps get them out of the way and kind of moved back to where you don't see them as much. But fingers crossed, right? Now, the second thing that's got me kind of excited is just a little further down, and it's the waist joint, actually, because it looks reminiscent of like the 30-minute mission swing down hip joint, which is actually a really unique joint, and I'm really excited if they do use it here because it looks like it. The Mercurius has one leg swept forward, and you kind of see the little side panel that goes into the peg. I'm really, really looking forward to this. I think that's going to help a lot if that articulation's limited in the torso or in the knees. Now, of course, the torso's probably going to have some crunch, so that'll help. But this would help make the legs more dramatic looking without really necessitating a bunch of knee joint movement. So that would be cool. Really excited for that. I think if they incorporate that, especially going forward, seeing more of that is going to be really cool because this is just a generally good joint. I don't really know why this hasn't been incorporated. Maybe Bandai was testing it with 30-minute mission and it's like, okay, we'll throw it in something kind of weird and offshoot like this. But it does really work well, and I think this is a good test bed for it in terms of Gunpla. Now, the last thing in articulation, which is kind of a minor thing, is the wrists. Now, this is by no means like confirmed. This is pure speculation. Not even really the promotional images are showing us exactly what this may be, but it looks like there is a gray piece in the wrist where the of course the hand meets the forearm, but it looks like that's a separate joint, or at least a separate part, if not a joint. It would be nice to see that have a little movement, not a lot of course, but have maybe like a little hinge or like a separate ball joint in there to where you could get a little bit more upward motion, or maybe you're not going to get any downward motion because there's armor there, but at least a little upward motion for the Vayeate or the Mercurius' shield sword thingy. I think that would work pretty well. I'm sure the Vayeate could get some use out of it, but with the big cannon, it's not going to be all that necessary. Maybe like the supporting arm or something could use it, but at least a little wiggle. It seems like the part could be there, and it seems like there's a reason to have it there. So fingers crossed, that would be really nice to see. Now, in terms of accessories, or accessories and gimmicks really, the next portion of this, I'm kind of separating them out by suit because we've seen a couple of different things. So starting off with Mercurius, the shield bits, the little defensor bits, all look to be separate. So they'll probably have like a flat PC joint that the little flat tab will plug into to hold together. But all of them will be detachable and have a 3mm peg on the back. So if you want to arrange them with a certain type of stand, I know the first batch of pre-orders, or like a very limited number of them, came with a stand that would have some extra little pegs you could plug into. But there's a couple of different ones you could use. I know the like rock blasting effect display base that like you see it a lot more for like Figure Eye Standard, and you do see it some with Gunpla. That has similar things that you could probably plug in, so that would be pretty useful there. There's functionality there, is what I'm trying to say. And it is cool. I mean, this is a big, huge upgrade from what we got in the 90s, where they kind of just swept forward. Which is kind of the second part of this, is it's hard to tell if that will actually swing forward again, because I believe, if I remember right, the Mercurius does that in the show. So it would be a pose that you would possibly want to pull off. and it kind of looks like you might have that capability. You don't really get a good under the torso arm area shot, but you do get a little bit of a glimpse with the Mercurius in one of the promotional images, and it looks like it might. We don't have a great idea of how the back connection works if it's just a 3mm peg, but even if it was and it had just one extra hinge, it could do the little flip under the arm defensors in the front thing. So that's a possibility. I'm hoping they carry it over because, like I said, the 90s high grade did it, and I'm sure we can absolutely do that now. Just kind of strange. But I do have to say one other thing on the Mercurius is, and this is for the Vayeate as well, but the coloration looks so good. I know most of it's red and you have kind of that pinkish hue, but all the accent colors are in the right spots. Everything looks good. It's really got at least something breaking it up everywhere. It's not just one big sheet of red. You've got some good panel lining details in there. You've got the different coloration in the torso and the shoulders. You've got the broken up part in the arms. You've got the little vents in the torso. You've got the little handle. Everything looks really good on both. I think it stands out slightly more on the Mercurius, but the Vayeate also shares that. And speaking of the Vayeate, it does look like we're going to have a pretty good support arm for the big beam cannon. And it does look like the handle might swivel as well, which would be pretty similar to what we got in the 90s with the high grade. And I'm pretty excited. I mean, there's not a huge amount of stuff you're going to be able to do just with a big beam cannon. I think it looks good. I know there's probably going to be a few stickers here and there. Much more so, I'd say, than probably the Mercurius. But generally speaking, the big beam rifle, its support arm looks fine. It looks like it's going to be articulated enough to where you can get some decent poses out of it, which is good. And the backpack is kind of the last thing I would say that isn't a concern, but it probably is going to be the yellow part in there is going to most likely be a sticker, if I'm being honest. As much as I'd like to think they molded it, there's nothing else yellow on that kit, and I cannot see Bandai doing that. Sure, there's the possibility. I just don't think they will. It's going to be a sticker, which is fine. Honestly, for something rounded like that, I'd say paint it or just leave the backpack closed and put it in a static pose. But either way, I'm really excited for both of these kits. In the comments down below, let me know what you think. Am I crazy and rambling, or do I possibly have some valid points? Anyway, thanks for stopping in for this special report on this episode of the Gunpla Network News. As always, I'm your host, The Spicer, and, of course, keep on building.